Before we start today's episode, a bit of housekeeping for all those listeners out there. Whichever your podcast listening platform of choice, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, reviews can make a huge impact. And not only do we value your feedback, which can help us create better content, it will also help others discover the podcast. So spread the love and leave a review if you've got a minute. And with that, on with today's show. I'm the Reverend Dr. Jenny McKay, veterinarian and minister in secular employment, environmentalist, activist, and self-confessed cat junkie. But believe it or not, I have never interviewed Luke Skywalker's stunt double.
Well, I'm very proud to say that I have. And
Well done, Beverley. So Beverley is author, journalist, and editor of Dogs Today. Can you tell us a little bit about your meeting with Luke Skywalker's stunt double?
well, I knew this chap, Colin Skeeping, from his dogs. He had some very gorgeous dogs, and they were the same breed as the breed I grew up with, bearded collies. And I always knew him as Colin, the agility man with these dogs at every beardy event I went to. And it was only when I started chatting to him that I realized actually he had rather a big life outside of this. And he was one of the first stuntmen in Britain. He was, before CGI, he was doing all those awful, dangerous stunts on the Star Wars trilogy. Superman with Christopher Reeves, most of the Bond movies. He had really lived. He was often Harrison Ford's stunt double for some of his other movies, and had become great friends with Harrison. And Harrison loved flying his little plane over to see Colin. And to anyone else, they would have just seen Colin as a little old man. And you only actually got to know him. He was still capable of doing all these stunts, still physically absolutely fit as a fiddle, and had just given it all up because he couldn't bear to leave his dogs behind to go on these Hollywood sets. So he decided instead to be Midsummer Murders stuntman instead.
Ah, much easier, so he could travel in and keep the dogs at home.
And I think if anybody is a regular watcher of Midsummer Murders, they might have thought it a bit odd that nearly every time there was a dog involved in an episode, it was a bearded collie. And the reason for that was Colin brought his dogs to work with him, and very often the acting dog that was picked for the job would never do it. Dogs are just totally unreliable if they're not properly trained. So his bearded collies were very unlikely guard dogs in some scenes, and it's a delight to watch the playbacks because then you just suddenly see, oh, there's Colin's dog again.
Oh, that is so funny. I'll have to go back and recognize those bearded collies. And you've met a whole range of very interesting people. And another really amazing person, of course, is Julian Clary.
Well, lovely Julian was probably the first human ever to be on a Dogs Today front cover. And we didn't realize how groundbreaking that would be because it would be many years before we'd ever put a human on there again. But he was on 1992 front cover, I think, with his dog Fanny the Wonder Dog, which let us be quite naughty with our headline. Julian Clary and his Fanny. And oh dear, but Julian's humour was very endearing, and of course over the years he would do more and more things that would be a bit doggy. And we would send journalists off to talk to him. And we were shocked when his autobiography came out that Dogs Today featured in the index. so we seem to have become sort of fondly remembered by him. He did have a little joke at one of our writers' expenses there because we had a very, very camp journalist who for him was the dream job was to go and interview Julian, and he spent hours getting himself ready and chose his outfit, and went off to London to interview Julian in one of these days where you only get 30 minutes, and then it's the next journalist, and he went along with a briefcase. And he didn't realise, but Julian was writing a column for The Guardian that week about his week. And he was feature large in it, our journalist. It said, the journalist from Dogs Today arrived with a large briefcase full of photographs of all his dogs. A list of names and one photograph would have sufficed because they were all identical. Oh dear!
Oh, how nice for the journalist.
I loved it that he'd wasted part of the 30 minutes talking him through his 12 English toy terriers. But Julian had been
wonderful.
kind.
Oh.
But our worst celebrity moment probably because we're not OK9 or Hello. We have some celebrity content, but we don't chase it really. We were in the 90s, or maybe it was the 2000s, maybe the 2000s. We kept getting phone calls from this lovely young actor who kept saying, "Can my dog be in your magazine?" And I'd be going, "Oh, who has anyone heard of it?" We would go, "We don't know who he is." And eventually, the work experience girl needed something to do. So he said, "Would you like to go and interview this chap who keeps phoning up about his dog?" And she said, "Can I take my mum with me?" And we go, "Yes, of course you can. That'll be fine." Anyway, it was the first ever interview that Tom Hardy ever gave to a journalist about how his gorgeous dog Max had changed his life, and he was named after Mad Max. So, but it's still quoted to this day.
Amazing! And what sort of dog was Max?
Max was a mutt. It was a crossbreed, and but it's he came along to acting school with him every day, and really he said it made it. He absolutely spilled his heart to our young Amelia, who was, her first ever interview. And she took the photographs as well, and the American magazine Vanity Fair, FAIR, not FUR, did a retrospective on Tom's love of dogs, which is legendary. And they led with Tom's first ever interview was in Dogs Today. And they put an exclamation mark after our name, which we thought was hurtful.
I think it was a great honour for him to be in Dogs Today.
Well, we'd have him back. Yeah. If he wants to go on the front cover, we'll make an exception.
Make him, make him your model of the month with his dogs.
Yeah, we would do that. But he was in several times after that as well, because he did every time he was in anything with a dog in, he'd just phone up. But now he's got so many. It's so very important. It's very hard to get a message to him.
That's right. That's right. Well, let's hope. Fingers crossed. And you never know, you might get him on your podcast. Do you have any plans to bring back that podcast, The Devil Wears Dog Fur? I know that started up during lockdown.
Well, I keep meaning to do it, and I just didn't quite get round to it. I did a little scurry of I did one episode last year, just the end of last year, where I was thinking what I might do is do a break off of talking to entrepreneurs who in the dog space, because I'd met an amazing vet who just absolutely blew my mind what he was doing. There's an Australian chap who has invented a microchip that passively monitors dogs, cats, horses, sheep. He's raising funds at the moment to get the development he needs to do it, but it will revolutionize human health as well as animal health if he can get it to the next stage. Because getting a resting heart rate as a veterinarian, you'll know this is impossible to get a resting heart rate on a dog or a cat, more a cat probably, because they're going to be deeply stressed when they're in the vets. But if you can have a chip that is talking to artificial intelligence all the time, so that it's analyzing the subtlest changes. Um, you'd get so much early warning of pain because some animals are so stoic, you don't know they're in pain. But this, imagine if you could on your phone have a human version of the app that simplifies it, but your vet in real time having it going to your animal's records so that wow, predictions of hard to diagnose conditions, I think would it would be a revolution.
Amazing,
And
amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
and the use for farmers, because in Australia, a lot of the cattle and the sheep or whatever are so far apart. If you can look on your phone and see there's sheep having difficulty giving birth, and you know the location as well because of these chips. They're they're like
Oh, it really could revolutionize things.
yes. So that spin-off was called Raising Unicorns. So we're looking for the unicorn in the pet space, and I weirdly had got myself involved in pet tech, and the oldest person in pet tech by a long way. But I really enjoyed meeting people from around the world that were breaking the mold, and meeting that vet. I just thought, wow.
Wow, that is amazing. I was just thinking the other day because Elon Musk he's brought out this chip to put in the brain, and I was just thinking I can see the way the world is going. We're going to be able to monitor every aspect of our health. And what about animals?
Yeah, if only Elon would talk to the lovely man who's doing VetChip, because ethically, the idea of it being developed for animals first, um, it's quite sneaky, really, because you're helping the animals by developing this chip, but the stuff that you're learning will you be used for human medicine, but you couldn't do it on humans because of the ethics involved. But lots and lots of pet owners and are volunteering in Australia to trial this early version of the chip, and because it's one of the things that really surprised me was he was a campaigner on so many levels. He'd been involved in he'd hated seeing animals suffering in hot cars because in Australia the climate's even more unforgiving than it is here for animals left in cars, and the idea that the chip could set off an alarm on your phone to say you've forgotten that the dog's in the car and it's overheating, you would save lives. And you
Oh, that's brilliant. I really hope that comes along in the market and he's successful. That sounds a great innovation.
know, so he was my veterinary version of Tom Hardy. But over the years, I've met some fantastic vets. The super vet.
Oh, Noel
No,
Fitzpatrick.
no, I knew Noel before he was a super vet when he was just a vet, and he was just beginning to beginning to become. He always was an exceptional person, but before he had his hospitals and all his ideas, he was just pioneering those very early ideas. And gosh, how his phenomenal growth in now the most famous vet in the world, I would say.
Yeah, that's right. My only claim to fame with him is that I was a year below him at vet school. So he went to University College Dublin. So Noel was the year above me.
Oh, I bet you've got some
So he
gossip.
was always yeah, a very interesting character even then.
When I interviewed him, when before he was famous, I thought I'd got this epic interview because he cried in my interview when he was telling me his story, and I was going, "Oh, isn't he amazing? His story about him saving a sheep on his father's farm," and he cried and he looked up and I was like, "Oh, it's lovely." And then I found out he was actually also an actor, and he was been in Casualty in The Bill. And I suddenly looked at him another way. I thought, you're just very, very clever, aren't you? Um, but he was genuinely recalling a very important moment. But yeah, he is one of those people that has had a million careers all at the same time, simultaneously, and he won't stop. He
No.
will keep
No,
going.
they say he hardly sleeps. I think he stays over in the practice, doesn't he?
Yeah. Well, if you've ever had an animal operated on by Noel, you can get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning that's telling you progress because he's just no idea what time it is. But he's doing what he loves,
Yeah,
and that's an amazing thing.
that's nice. It's really good, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you, of course, you're doing what you love. Can you tell me a little bit about your career and your journey to becoming the editor of Dogs Today?
Oh, well, I was dog mad um, as a child, which is just it's inevitable. You probably hear barking in the background. It's really embarrassing. My husband's not keeping them under control, but yeah, when I was a little girl growing up in Liverpool, my parents wanted me to get a scholarship into the local posh school because they didn't want to pay. And my brother had got one, and he was really clever. And they thought there's no way I was going to be able to get one, but they thought they'd incentivize me. And they said, "What would you like if you could? We'll give you what you like if you can get the scholarship." And I got them to say a horse, which was stupid, really, because we were living in a semi-detached house in a suburb, and none of us had any experience of horses. And they bought me loads of books about dogs in the interim because I got the scholarship, which was a bit of a shock. And I fell in love with a photograph, and the photograph was of a bearded collie, which were rare as hen's teeth. Nobody had them, but I fell in love with this little face that looked at me. And at 11 years old, I went to see a litter of puppies, and I said, I want that one. And the breeder went, that's a boy dog, not a girl dog. And I said, no, it's not. It's a girl dog. And I was a horribly precocious child. And she went, okay, yes, you're right, have it. And it was the only dog in the litter that was a champion. And I stumbled into showing by mistake by going on the wrong night to training class. And somebody went, that's the best bearded collie we've ever seen.
Oh,
And my parents all got sort of, oh, this is fun. And I spent the next 8 years or so of my life being a dog show person. So I was showing, judging. I was the breed club secretary. I was just the most biggest doggy bore there was because I didn't know I had no critical. I was only a kid. I didn't know what it was all about. Um, but I actually loved the dog, and the dog that changed everything was one that technically was perfect, but caught parvovirus when just as the virus was hitting and we didn't have any vaccines, and it was every dogs were litters were dying everywhere. And I had a lovely vet who was young herself. It was her first job, and she said she was so honest. She said, "Well, we could admit her, but every dog we've admitted so far has died. So you'd be better keeping her at home, keeping her spirits up, and just keep the fluid going. And let's just give it a try. So far, I haven't been able to save one." So she just told us what was the best thing to do, gave us a Buscopan injection every day. And I went home and spent the next 7 days and nights syringing liquid into this little puppy that went from the most gorgeous, fluffy puppy in the world to looking like an empty pajama case because the fur was twice this. It absolutely lost every bit of fat and very nearly died. Just survived. And that was it. I was gone. This was my dog in the million that I loved more than any other dog because I'd spent that intense period with her and she never gave up. And of course, because she was so ill, because she then couldn't be socialized because she was so contagious, she was very timid and she only loved me. She had separation anxiety before I'd even heard of the term, but it was just huge devotion. And I became a pet owner overnight. Because all the show people went, "What have you kept her for? What's the point of that? You won't be able to show her. You won't be able to, what are you doing?" And I went, "No, but this is more important. This is
she's
more
a lovely
important."
dog. You saved her life, didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah. So she was my pivotal dog. And I then tried to find work that was involving dogs. And the careers advisor had said, "You're not clever enough to be a vet. I don't know what you're going to do." And I found this bizarre niche of doggy journalism that no one thought existed. And I worked at everything that had the word dog in it. Dog World, Terrier World, Our Dogs. Um, and they were all incredibly dull. And they were all about shows and lists of names, boring, boring, boring stuff. But, it got me interested in journalism. Well, not really journalism, just it it showed me it was actually not that difficult to write things.
Yeah, and I guess you made very, very good contacts as well through those.
Well, I from the show world, it was easy because I was like the only person that was, in an older world. When you're a child, you stand out as you've got a USP. So, um, people wanted to employ me because no one was interested in working in the sector. So, I got my foot on the ladder because there was not much competition. Um, but I soon got bored in all of those places. And then I saw an advert in one of the newspapers for the Kennel Club, and that they needed an information officer. And I thought, well, that would be interesting because now I'd seen the world of dogs from every angle. I was intrigued as to how we could maybe do things a bit better. Um, I judged overseas. I judged in Sweden, and I'd seen the Swedish Kennel Club and how well they did things, and how they all the health testing and the temperament testing, and there was a new way of doing things, and I wanted to influence. So I was an annoying person to work at the Kennel Club because I wasn't just content to just sit there and go to shows and be grateful. I would try and you know suggest we do things a bit better. And after 5.5 years of that, and realizing that I still couldn't afford to actually live with my dogs because the pay was so bad, and I was living in central London, and I wasn't actually making any rapid change. Um, I had a moment of, really maybe I need to go and get a proper job to support my dogs. And I had this weird thing where I entered a competition. I'm a terrible person for going into stupid competitions. And I entered this one without knowing what the prize was. And it was daytime television had just begun. And This Morning was just in its infancy with Richard and Judy. And I caught the end of something that said, tell us what you'd like to wear next year and send it in. And I was on a very long train journey home back to from Liverpool to London. I just drew some sketches of what I would like to wear with dogs. Had dogs in the pictures as well. Sent it off. Didn't know what the prize was, and won Young Fashion Designer of the Year, which was a bit of a surprise because I wasn't a fashion designer.
No, no, another string to your bow there.
Well, no, not really. I was just good at entering competition,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I didn't know what the prize was, and the prize was to work as a fashion designer with a top fashion designer, and then be on the show with all your designs. And the director was a bit, met me and went, well, who's your favorite designer? I said, I didn't know the name of any, so I said, I just like them all. And he said, well, you. And I said, I don't really want to be a fashion designer. He says, well, can you just pretend and go on the show, do this, and just don't mention dogs? And I said, well, I'm quite interested in what you're doing. I'd like to do the interviewing of the fashion people, if that's okay, because I've got lots of questions because I don't know anything about it. And he said, all right then, but don't say dogs because it'll ruin it. And we got right to the end, and Richard and Judy, of course, never behaved and never did what the autocue told them to do. And they, after this beautiful little film of me talking to Princess Diana's favourite fashion designer, they said, and what are you doing now, Beverley? And I said, I'm a dog journalist. I work for the Kennel Club. I just thought it was hilarious. But I'd had a taste of a different world by
Yes.
doing that bit of television and that bit of talking to people in the media that were similar age. And I suddenly thought,
Yeah, what wonderful. Just amazing the way, you stumbled across that.
well, it sort of made me uncomfortable for staying doing what I was doing and not actually achieving anything because In that one conversation, that TV director had said, "Well, why are you doing this job? Your bosses aren't listening to you. You're not living with your dogs. You're earning a pittance. Why are you doing it?" And I just went, "Yeah, why?" And at that point, I then applied for every job in the Guardian media section, all the corporate journalism jobs with the big salaries. I just randomly scattergun, just applied and thought, am I a journalist? I don't know if I don't know if I am. And I didn't think I was. And I got a job. The first job I went for, I got, and it was a really huge salary doing corporate journalism for British Telecom. And it was sort of bizarre because they thought it was very funny, my CV. And when they interviewed me, they thought it was just hilarious, all these dog things I'd done. But the fact that, it was so boring what they were doing, they thought, oh, well, at least she's got a sense of humor. And we can train her to do desktop publishing, which was new, and you could do radio journalism with us. They just needed somebody they could do something with. So they were going to say, we're paid loads of money. It's a boring job, but and I instantly was bored rigid. I never earned so much money in my life. And I just sat there every day going, this is so undemanding. I mean, I could have done it forever and been very, very wealthy.
But it just wasn't motivating.
No. And one of my colleagues was still reading The Guardian because they were all living in their fantasies as well, hoping to escape because it was actually so tediously dull writing about phones. But he spotted this job, launch editor of a new dog magazine. And he said, it's made for you. It's just perfect. And I went, it'll be rubbish. It'll be underfinanced. It'll be a kitchen table job. Oh, I'll apply. And I didn't, I did it my lunch, I handwritten CV, sent it off. And then I discovered it was actually far from a kitchen table job. It was the Daily Mail were launching a pet magazine. And it was Lord Rothermere, the proprietor, the only time he'd ever come up with his own idea for a publication. He wanted to give the pet dog a voice. And I didn't, nobody who worked in that huge organization hardly ever saw him. He was sort of like this mystery figure. And I applied for this job without, well, really, I'd done lots of dog jobs, but a serious launch by a massive media company, you would normally only the most experienced editor would get that job. And I thought, oh, well, maybe nobody else applied. But no, actually, loads of other people did apply. And I looking back over time, I've realized the reason I got the job was because they thought I would be easy to boss around.
Oh, really? Was that because you were a female? Or...
I was young, I was inexperienced, and I was passionate about dogs, but I didn't really know anything about publishing, really. And I didn't realize that the people that had employed me didn't actually believe in what we were doing. And that the only person who believed in it was me and Lord Rothermere. Everyone in between us thought he'd gone mad.
Didn't believe in it. Oh.
He thought he absolutely totally lost the plot. And they also thought that because he was so rich, he was the seventh richest man in Britain at the time, that he would spend all his money just on this pet project, literally a pet project. And that no matter what we did, he would pay. So we were printed on toilet paper. I was given an editorial budget of no money whatsoever, virtually. Had to put my own desk together. I couldn't have been made to feel less helped.
Oh,
but
dear.
Because they were just not interested in what we're doing.
Yeah, it wasn't their priority.
But a year and a half into very odd sort of thing, we sort of connected with the readers, despite it, and we've got sort of bags and bags of post, whereas all the other magazines, we were in a building with The Field and Shooting Times and Airgun World. It was a very masculine environment of people killing things, basically, or shooting things, or Every editor was a man. They all drove Range Rovers. I was very out of my comfort zone in that
But
company.
you broke the mold, didn't you? Yes.
Well, I kind of broke the mold. They just all thought, oh, she's balmy. Because I would do things like I'd stay up all night making a costume for. We were worried about people not picking up their dog's poo, so we invented a character called Scooperman.
Ah,
And I didn't have any money, so budget was low. So we got a Superman costume, and I altered it and made it Scooperman, and I made a matching one for the dog. So, and we had somebody who wasn't an actor, was just a friend, went out into Windsor where we were based, and would reveal themselves to be Scooperman if someone scooped and give them a prize, which got tremendous coverage. So we were getting lots of the magazine was getting well known without spending any money, and the other editors didn't understand viral marketing. I mean, it didn't exist because we didn't have the internet. So
of course, it was very, very different then, wasn't it? Yeah,
yeah,
no
but
digital media.
we were just no one had ever done any of this stuff in dogs before. So we just every week would come up with something stupid to do that the media loved. And but unfortunately, um, the many levels of management between us, me and Lord Rothermere, got too sneaky, and we're putting so much overhead in our figures that we were very unprofitable, even though we were spending so
You
little.
were very, very popular, weren't you? Yeah, yeah.
But I didn't know how the business side of it worked. So I'd go to meetings, I'd go, well, everything's going great, we've got all this publicity and all the readers love us. And then there would be a balance sheet and we'd lost money. Okay, how's this happening? Anyway, they all would thought that Rothermere would bankroll whatever. So they were actually redistributing the funds to the other magazines, which are less profitable. So all the heat and light was going on our account, not all the other magazines. And Lord Rothermere, after 2 years of this, got so much pressure from his directors that this was your pet project, Veer. Obviously, you've gone barking mad. This is wrong. Look at how much money it's losing. And he decided to close the magazine, and he was heartbroken because it was the only magazine he'd ever invented. And I got the call because come now. I'm making everyone redundant. If you're there, you can tell them. And I went, how do you mean? What's happening? It says, oh, well, you're closed. And I said, why? And I came in and we were in offices in Sheet Street, just around the corner from the castle. And it was on the day when Windsor Castle started burning down that we were closed. And I sort of went, oh, she's got other castles. I've only got one dog magazine. How can you close this? This is the best magazine in the world. And weirdly, me and all the girls that were working on it, we went to the pub and we said, shall we just come in as normal tomorrow and keep going? And they were, oh, yeah, I'll come up with something. Well, maybe I'll buy the magazine. And that's what we did. We just kept going back into work and worked on the next edition. And everyone thought we were totally barking mad. And my ultimate boss within that business said, well, I'll pass it higher up. See if you can see if you can buy it. Have you got any money? I said no. It's a bit odd, isn't it? Why do you think you can buy it then? And it went all the way up to Lord Rothermere, who called me into the Derry Street office, the Daily Mail head office, and I had to go up in the private lift to the chairman's office, and I was led into the boardroom that he has with all this wooden panelling. And he sat me down and he just very quiet. He says, so here, you want to buy my magazine? I said, well, yes. Yes. Well, my financial advisor says that I should invest in you. Would £1 be okay? And I said, well, thank you. He says, can I invest? Can I invest in your new company? And he says, I don't want to be the majority shareholder because you've got to be in charge. And I went, yes, that'll be fine. And he says, would you like to meet my financial advisor? I said, yes, please. And it was his dog.
Ah, oh, how wonderful.
So that's how I ended up owning
And
my own
still,
magazine.
yeah, still growing. It's 30 years now, isn't it?
30 something years. But I thought, oh, he's seen potential in me here. No, I found out afterwards. He just thought it was amusing. He thought it was lovely that I'd asked. And to him, £10,000 which he invested was pocket money for him.
Nothing, yeah. But he
And
must have been very proud as the years went on to think,
well, that first year, where I sort of went and just had to invent it really from and learn how to do it and do everything. Um, I had no idea he was expecting me to fail. So I worked really, really hard. And by the end of that first year, I'd seen something to another competition I could enter. And, you already heard that I'm a bit mad. I just enter competitions. And this one, I thought, this is fantastic. The Periodical Publishers Association, the magazine Oscars, doesn't charge you to enter. Anyone can. So, oh, right, I'll enter that. They've got a category for small publisher. I'm only 5'2". I'm very
oh,
small.
you're 2 inches taller than me then.
Oh, I feel really that's help my self-esteem. But I also discovered their definition of small was less than 50 employees. Well, we had less than 5, and that included the dogs. So we definitely fitted the category. So I sent the form off and didn't think any more about it. And then I didn't realize, but all of those awards things, they're a bit of a con usually, that they just want people to buy tickets and buy tables. And that's how that industry works. So they phoned me and said, "Oh, we've got a special deal. You can have a table for £1,000." And I was going, "Grief, I can't afford £1,000. I can't even afford to get my hair cut. What are you talking about? No, bang." Anyway, the phone calls came as it came nearer and nearer to the awards. The calls got more and more. "Oh, I mean, it's not that expensive. Just one ticket. You can have one ticket. This price." No, definitely not. And then I'd had a falling out with the distributor, which was quite a mega thing because they just didn't do their job properly. And then when they didn't do things properly, they'd send me a bunch of flowers to say sorry. Oh, that really annoyed me. So I changed distributor. I moved to a new distributor who seemed really lovely. And I thought, that's nice. Now we've got a new distributor. He phoned me up and said, "Would you like to sit on our table at the awards do free of charge?" Oh, thank you.
Perfect.
And I had no idea, but we won the award. We won Small Publisher of the Year. The very first year we were publishing.
It's
And
wonderful.
Lord Rothermere heard about it and went, "Oh my God, she's done it. How did she do that?" Because you'd gone from, the best people in the world were working on this, he was saying. He'd forced the Evening Standard editor to produce a dummy version of Dogs Today and told him it was rubbish. And then I'd done one, and he liked it. So at that point, he went, "I've had enough of magazines." And he sold the Field, Shooting Times, the lot of them, just sold them.
All gone.
He says, "They're not gentlemen. They didn't look after my magazine like you did." I thought, "Oh, that's nice." But,
Is he still alive?
sadly not. But he revealed the reason he wanted to start a magazine. And that was fantastic to know because he was not like a normal lord. Not that I knew lords enough to know what normal lords were like, but I now understand that he was a really unusual one in that he spent a lot of his time overseas because he didn't like he was not like the Daily Mail at all. But when he was in New York, he could be anybody. Nobody knew who he was, and he could pass without people treating him strangely because people when you've got power don't treat you well honestly really. So he was living as a private man in New York, and he walked past a pet shop window and saw an enormous Japanese Akita puppy that was past its sell-by date. And while he knew it was wrong, he couldn't keep walking. So this 80-year-old man went into that pet shop and bought that Japanese Akita on the spur of the moment, thinking it might not be there the next day because it's definitely too big. And he staggered to take it home to where he was living. No yellow cab would stop because no one knew he was a very wealthy man. They just saw a man with a huge dog and thought, no, I'm not having that cab. And then he discovered that we had antiquated quarantine laws back then. And that would mean this dog would have to sit in quarantine for 6 months.
Oh dear, yes.
And he loved this dog. And he just said, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I know, I'll start a magazine and we'll change quarantine. We'll get rid of it. And that was my job.
So that's what he'd been after all along.
So it was revealed, and I then became part of a pressure group called Passports for Pets that was run by a wonderful lady called Lady Fretwell, who used to be was the wife of the Paris ambassador. I think they were the most incredibly posh, influential people I'd ever heard of. But they all loved dogs, and they all wanted to change the law, and they all got together. And I was the only journalist allowed in, and I was part of this pack of super rich, super influential people who all got together and said, we're going to change the world. We're going to get rid of quarantine. And I was to try and write articles that stop people being quite so terrified of rabies because we'd been so successful at frightening the life out of people that people really had an inflated idea of the chances of us getting rabies. Whereas the biggest chance of us getting rabies was all the people were smuggling the dogs in because they didn't want to put them into quarantine for 6 months, that there was another way. So I had to sort of put up boring, sort of sensible articles about, why we should change. But these guys would have parties at Harry's Bar and various other amazing venues where they'd come up with other ways of changing the law. And one of them was to all put their might together and say, well, who do we know in politics? And they went, well, the current Prime Minister was John Major, and he wouldn't even take their call. And they went, oh, well, that's very disappointing, isn't it? Because, the Daily Mail was true blue. And suddenly we had a Conservative Prime Minister that wasn't going to take Lord Rothermere's calls. So who's the new kid on the block? Who's up and coming? Young Tony Blair, Labour Party leader. Tony took the call. Tony, will you bring quarantine in if you get in? Well, of course. Yes. What do you want me to do? Right. Daily Mail switches allegiance. Supports Tony Blair.
Wow. And that was just based on dogs and their passports.
The editor was furious because trying to it's like turning a sort of a massive ship around. They'd been nothing other than supportive of the Conservatives to suddenly back Tony Blair.
Yeah.
Oh, that was ridiculous. And they absolutely kicked off like mad. But he didn't care. He just said, well, it's more important. I want my dog to just travel.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it worked.
And that's what happened.
That's what we got. And then I discovered that Lord Rothermere was reading the magazine extremely closely. And if I got something wrong, I'd get a call, from New York saying, because we had doggy horoscopes. They were only meant to be a bit of fun by Jack Russell Grant. We thought they were tremendously amusing. And he phoned up to say, Aries, the dates were wrong. I was going, oh my God, he's reading it very closely, isn't he?
He was looking at that, yes.
Thought, gosh, maybe his dog was born in April. But then because we were launching in the 1990s, Dangerous Dogs Act was just a fresh thing. And it was catastrophic. And it was horrible. The injustices were just so, I mean, it was a terrible era to live through. And we were telling the stories in the magazine of how normal people were being criminalized because they'd got a rescue dog that neighbors thought was a pit bull. And the riot squad would come, take the dog away, and they'd fight for 6 months. And teachers who'd never been on the wrong side of the law were suddenly criminalized. And I would write the stories. I mean, we were just writing the stories. We were talking to dog people. So, we all knew what was going on. But Lord Rothermere was reading it as well. And he'd go, well, that's awful. So he'd get on the phone and the Home Secretary, come round. And he'd make the Home Secretary go round for dinner. And he wouldn't let them leave until he'd read the articles on the Dangerous Dogs Act. And there was one story that really caught his eye, a beautiful pit bull called Dempsey that was exempted, one of the earliest dogs. And Diane, the owner, was such a lovely lady. It was a gift from her son. And she had no idea what a pit bull was. And it had brought it up as just a sweet, sweet dog. And she complied, she exempted, the dog was wearing a muzzle. And a friend took the dog to the shops. And on the way to the shops, the dog started vomiting. And the man who was walking the dog loosened the muzzle to allow the dog to be sick and then put the muzzle back on. 2 policemen witnessed it. The dog was seized. And at that stage, the dog was going to be killed. That was the way that the act was phrased when it first came out.
Appalling, isn't it?
She spent 4 years taking it to the European Court of Human Rights everywhere to fight for this dog's life, and has still got nowhere. And we put it in the Little Dogs Today. Brother reads it. That's disgusting. My Home Secretary, round now, read this. Home Secretary went, I can't do anything about it. He said, I'm really annoyed now. Front page of the Daily Mail. Dempsey, £11 million of taxpayer money wasted on this dog being sick, released. It was just like.
So what did she do? What did she do over those 4 years then?
She fought. And the dog was in secret kennels. She got one visit for 45 minutes. And they were reunited, and the dog was still lovely. Because I think the dog was actually such a sweetheart that the people in the kennels had been nice to her. And we put them on the front cover, another human, the lady with Dempsey. And it was one of our best front covers ever because everyone knew how hard this woman had fought for this dog's life. But having him in our back pocket of reading every word and overlooking did amplify. And it did make you realise that actually you can change things if you make enough noise. And that's kind of something that we, even without him being still with us, we've just been cheeky, and we've told the readers that if they unite and make enough noise, the politicians will
have to listen. They will have to listen. And of course, we're in a dreadful situation at the moment, aren't we, with the XL bullies? And I know a lady who has 2 lovely XL bullies, beautiful, beautiful dogs, so sweet-tempered. And, they've had to be muzzled, they've had to be put on leads, and they feel punished because they can't go out and mix with their friends in the park or anything. It's just dreadful. So, yeah, the government should not be looking at blanket bans like this, should they? They should be looking at dog behaviour and ownership.
Yeah, I mean, the shocking thing, because ever since the first Dangerous Dogs Act, there's been investigation, government investigation into the Act as to whether or not it makes people any safer. And every inquiry has come back saying breed-specific legislation just doesn't work. I mean, it hasn't made people any safer. I mean, one of the statistics is, well, we should have banned the pit bull in the 1990s because none should be bred from. It was illegal. It was, it should have been genocide, really, of the pit bull. They should have been none of them. There are as many more pit bulls now than there ever was before. They were banned. And more people were killed by pit bulls after the ban than before the ban. So what did it achieve? It was a pure diversion of politicians being seen to be doing something, but not actually doing anything effective. And we thought that the politicians had learned the lesson, and that it was an unpopular thing to repeal because the danger was somebody would be bitten the next week, and then you would be the one that repealed the act. So we knew it was always a hot potato. Neither party was particularly keen on tackling because it was a poison chalice. But to suddenly get a prime minister behaving in a presidential way and saying, ignoring all the experts and just saying, we will ban this breed without actually finding out whether it was achievable or feasible, not listening to a single expert, not a single argument in Parliament. All done through ancient statutory instruments, totally undemocratic. And we've ended up with yet again a terrible piece of legislation that none of the experts totally ignored the vets, totally ignored the charities, only listened to people who amplified what was a cheap and easy fix for something that gave people the impression that, oh, we're going to look after public safety. And sadly, I mean, that just the weekend just gone, we had a grandmother die who, the law has not made her safer. Those dogs, if they had been exempted in the home, they would not be muzzled. And that is where most fatal dog bites occur, in the home, and the dog is usually biting a member of the family of the owner. Mm-hmm. That is obviously something that needs to be factored in, that if you're going to save lives, you need something that is going to change things, not just cosmetically by people putting a muzzle on a dog when they're walking. No, you've got to change the way people breed dogs, the way they sell dogs, the way we train dogs. All these things, three things, are badly regulated, and being bad at these things is financially profitable. And
yeah,
that's
it was just an easy target, wasn't it, to say we've achieved something.
We've finally done something, yeah. And it was one of those ticks, oh, I said I was going to do it, and we found somebody who's done it, and we sacked her immediately after she produced the statutory instrument, so that, yeah, you've done that in time, well done. And now Scotland were holding firm and were saying our legislation is actually superior. They've got the control of dogs order, which is much better. Really, they've started to put the building blocks in there of a better way of doing things. And then just a few media headlines was enough to have the politicians jerking their knees and not listening to logic. And
right.
Yeah,
and that went through as well. There's still a judicial review, isn't there, ongoing?
It's unfortunately, it did look like we were going to get somewhere with that, but I now fear not. The actual initially, it looked like the judicial review would look at the whole of breed-specific legislation, and then it would be finally the arena everyone needed to every expert could then say, look, it doesn't work. Look, this hasn't made anyone any safer. But no, they wanted to just look at the adding of the XL bully. They're just looking at a very little tiny bit of it. And unfortunately, the judiciary have looked at the early stages of it, and the first reading of the case, they can say yes or no. And if they say yes, that there's a really strong case, it will affect the amount of costs should you lose. Unfortunately, they looked at the case and said no. So now proceeding, potentially there are hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of costs if this fails, because the government has unlimited funds to throw at winning this case. Mm-hmm. Bulldog owners globally raised £200,000, but that's like a day and a half of legal costs. So I don't think we can hope for that to be the saviour. We've got a few MPs who are pretty amazing. I mean, Christopher Chope, who previously was only famous for the upskirting mess where he vetoed some good laws, which he was apparently doing it for constitutional reasons, but he did have nothing against women. He got a terrible reputation because of that. But he had a Rottweiler in the 1990s when he was a young politician, and he was there when all the politicians were trying to ban Rottweilers as well as pit bulls. And it was only because he actually took his dog to work with him every day, because in those days you're allowed to take your dogs in with you at the House of Commons, that everyone met this Rottweiler and said, oh, this is ridiculous. Why should we ban these? They're lovely. So he'd seen at firsthand how hot-headed politicians get around media excitement about dog biting. So he's, even though he's a conservative, he was standing up saying, we need to debate this in Parliament. We need to listen to the experts. But he only got 13 MPs to back him, and most of those were other Tories. There's a lot of unhappiness about this piece of legislation, but I think we'll have to wait for another government for. But it's not looking. I think the danger is that it polled well for Rishi to make this ban, because everything had been whipped up.
It was whipped up, because I remember somebody got in touch with me on my social media as a Reverend Vet, and she said, could you do like an online prayer, because those of us who have XL bullies were really, really suffering. And I did do that, and I got an awful lot of negative comments. How can this lady who's a vicar possibly speak up for these awful dogs? You're right, it was just whipped up, and people were given that perception that it's just these big blokes who go out with these dogs and they use them for dog fighting and they're vicious.
But it's easier to vilify the dog than the human. So I must admit, I'm very, I don't like being bullied, and the people who are keen on this ban really are using every trick in the book, and so I refuse to back off on social media. I just keep on saying,
yeah, you do, and
dangerous dogs are created by dangerous people. And it's no good blaming this particular variety of dog, because they'll only make another dog dangerous. They'll just change it. They'll mate it with a chow so it's got fluffy fur, and then it's legal. Or they'll buy a cane corso, which is even bigger. Or they'll buy a Turkish Kangal, which is even bigger again.
That's right. And it'll go underground, and yeah.
But the problem is that dangerous people, you've got to tackle them.
Exactly. You're right. They'll find another big dog breed to cross it with. Awful.
And that's the ugly truth, is that whenever any fatal bites occurred, the media are very slow to point a finger at a human it used to be children that were having these horrible things happen to them. No one would ever say, well, why did you ever let that happen? What was the level of supervision? What? Because someone's the adult in charge who creates the chaos that these events happen. I mean, someone acquires dogs they can't control. Someone acquires too many dogs, doesn't ever get good advice, and uses horrible aversive methods that they've seen on TikTok. And then they wonder
why these things happen.
Why you get, oh, it's a surprise. It's the dog that's at fault. No, it's the human that made those choices.
Very, very, very sad about the XL bullies.
Very sad, and very sad for the lives lost, and very sad for the people in the veterinary world and the rescues that are having to deal with the fallout of this, because bad breeders who sold dogs to people who were passive at best, given the difficulty of having to exempt, so many people were dumping their dogs.
I saw an awful one. A poor dog had been thrown off a bridge.
Yes. I mean, unbelievable cruelty. But those people who joined a vocation or chose a career in rescue did not expect to have to be executioners. And with so little time to find homes, and already rescue so overstretched, 130% capacity before this, and a real rush to the deadlines were unrealistic, and every expert said, no, we need longer to neuter these dogs, we need longer to find homes. This is putting a deadline of after Christmas for rehoming dogs. Normally, rescue just doesn't exist over Christmas. Nobody rehomes over Christmas because you don't want impulse purchases of rescue dogs. You just, oh no, it's an awful idea. So we ended up with that bottleneck of dogs stuck in rescue, very much often the puppies and, innocents, dogs that,
And they can't be rehomed.
no.
Yeah.
And I think one of the rescues has been very brave and has publicly admitted that they're killing these dogs, and they've got a tremendous hate online. But it shouldn't be a dirty secret. It shouldn't be something that they have to live with for the rest of their lives alone. We should all feel what they're feeling, because it was our politicians that forced good people to do these things. Because if they didn't, they were totally in an impossible situation. Whereas the rescues could not keep these dogs for the rest of their lives locked up.
No,
So
they couldn't. They couldn't. It's impossible. They were in an impossible situation, aren't they?
yeah, and I think that the mental health of vets is already appalling, isn't it? Hugely stressful job, but making them kill dogs just on a physical description that's so vague.
That's right. That's right. I think that's also part of it as well, isn't it? A few millimeters in size can make the
suddenly it's not
difference.
dangerous. Half a centimeter can mean dangerous or not dangerous, dead or alive. And those gentle souls, that
Very,
haunts
very
them,
sad.
haunts them
Very,
dearly.
very sad story indeed.
Yeah. So it does seem like I've been doing this job for 100 million years, but frankly, every day there's so many stories that
There's
are
something
desperate.
new, isn't there? All the
That,
time.
yeah, that need, someone's wrong on the internet. You've got to go sort something out. Let's have a campaign. Let's change the world. And um, it's exciting to try and influence people to do the right thing, just to be brave, to not just say what's easy, to be trouble causers, to be thorns in the side of oh, let's just put up with it. No, let's try and get this country having proper rules and regulations that make it. We're always priding ourselves being this nation of animal lovers. We're absolutely appalling, really.
We
I mean,
are. We've got a lot of the animal shelters are overflowing, aren't they?
yeah, and that's one of the things that I've probably I had a sort of one of those brainwaves years ago where I realised that it's all related. That if you made breeding have a consequence, if you made it so that it was profitable to do it well, and to actually breed dogs that needed to be as healthy as possible and the best possible pets, and you had some pride in what you did, if we created that person in society that bred rarely, exceptionally well, using the methods that pre-train the dogs in those first 8 weeks to be the easiest pets to onboard, so that it was, well, there'd be less dogs in rescue, because if every breeder only bred as many as they could give lifetime cover for, and you did it locally and sustainably, and we didn't have people having 10,000 breeding bitches in a shed somewhere, which we still do have, and it's legal. And not only that, you can get better star rating as a breeder by doing it commercially in that way. We'd have less problems in society.
Yeah.
So
it would be so much better for the animals and the owners. And we saw in COVID as well, didn't we? I mean, people were not getting their dogs socialized. That's a whole other story, isn't it? We just get a dog and it'll fit into our lives, and
it's one click. I mean, that's the thing. Now that we've got the internet, it's so easy just to browse, fall in love with a photo, and click. And Action Fraud found that so many people fell in love with a photo of a dog that didn't exist and paid the deposit for a dog that didn't exist and got scammed that way, which in a way was, it's Darwin at work, really, isn't it? Well, if you're that stupid, you've lost your money. Well done. no animals suffered. But it made you realize how random it is that people are just scrolling and
Yeah,
clicking.
it's easy. It's very, very easy, isn't
And
it?
we need to, if dogs are family and we accept that dogs are family, then we should be adopting them and fostering them. And well, we should know your dog's mum, and you should keep in touch with your dog's brothers and sisters, and you should enjoy that, and you should celebrate that you know the lineage, you know
It's a
the
huge pleasure. One of the pleasures of dog ownership, isn't it?
yeah. But how do we change the next generation so that they, just like they've changed, they've all become vegan, they've all become, interested in the planet. How do you make them care about the provenance of their dog, so that the next dog they get, they ethically source, so that it's bred with either bred with love and care and whole of life, or it's from a rescue that is really a rescue and isn't pretending to be a rescue, because there's loads of those as well, of people buying in dogs overseas that look gorgeous. They've never been a pet dog and they're importing them to
I
sell.
know, I know, I know, and we've got so many here. You don't need to import. Well, I guess on the podcast, that's one small step. We're bringing that to to people's attention. And I know Beverly, you will continue on social media and also in Dogs Today.
Oh,
So
I'll
it's
definitely
been
keep going.
it's been wonderful to speak to you and hear about your experiences. And
Oh,
what's next for you, Beverly? Any other major projects?
well, there's a few things on the go. I sort of I discovered tech pet,
Oh,
pet,
this Australian vet.
yeah. And I discovered that there is this culture of everyone is in that creating something that breaks the mold. They meet up all over the world in these meetings, and I managed to go along to one of these in Austria and met all these pet tech entrepreneurs, and I suddenly realized this is, why can't we change the way everyone in the world gets their next pet? Why can't I've got an idea called the Bark Angel, which unifies all the good people that already exist. So, all the dog trainers that are qualified, all the dog groomers that are qualified and experienced, because anybody can just come up with a silly name and open a shop, and they do, and have great marketing. Actually get proper, good trainers, good groomers, all of these people who are interested in dogs in an altruistic way as well as a business way. Unite them all, give them another skill, make them the guru that you go to when you want your next dog, and have someone hold your hand when you go through this process, so that you put the blinkers on, you don't scroll. Someone helps you find a breeder that's done all the health tests, has reared them using puppy culture or one of these other new modern ways, that the puppy you get is already house trained, is already used to being in the car, not frightened of fireworks. I mean, who wouldn't want
Absolutely. And
that rather
they
than a
help you
dog?
choose the breed that's best for
Well,
you as well.
also, just well, yes, and that's something I learned, because I went to work at a few tech startups. Just I'm always interested in how all these things work, and I ended up doing one-to-one counselling with new owners, and helping them, because most people can only name about 10 breeds of dog, or that they know well enough to know what they like to live with. The danger is we pick on physicality and we go, I like this type of dog, rather than I have this sort of life that needs this amount of exercise. Whereas, weirdly, my life has meant that I've got to know a lot of dogs and a lot of dog owners by doing breed surveys. I do this thing in the magazine every month where we pick a breed, we have a really in-depth survey, and we, on social media, we say, if you've got this breed, if you've owned them any period in your life, fill this in. And then I've got data on every breed of dog, what they really like to live with. And I've been doing it for so long, we've done every breed there is, really much. And they're always getting topped up, because we keep them open forever. So if someone says, this is my blueprint for perfection, and often it will be in your mind's eye, you're either a shaggy dog person or you're a pricky dog person, or there is a face that melts your heart. And there is going to be nothing you can do to barter that, actually what you need is a Great Dane. No, they're not going to go for it. So if you can find something that roughly fits their ideal physicality, but find one that's got a temperament and a history that is more akin to if they're couch potatoes, something that's going to possibly have a lower intelligence rating than one that is going to totally make their life a misery if they
Is this
don't.
something we can do? Can we go on a web page and
Well, I've got a thing called the barkangel.co.uk that I made this website in my spare time, where I'm sort of putting all these ideas together that that it needs to be an app. It needs to be something that's in your pocket so that when you're thinking you're going to get a dog, you'll go, and then you'll just fall into this world where you only ever meet altruistic dog people, and you only get proper advice, because the internet is full of information about dogs, which is really, really unreliable. So a curated space where you can come to no harm, whereas you'll only meet people who will help rather than hinder. It's still possible to make catastrophic mistakes. And I've worked at startups where we have held the hands, where you've gone through the whole thing, we found the perfect, and then the person's life becomes chaotic in some other unpredictable way, and then you have to reverse the dog out and find it at home. But that is happening all over the world, all over the time. That's life. People never move in a straight line, and that's why rescue should exist. And in Sweden, that's what rescue is for unforeseen circumstances where dogs suddenly become unwanted for nobody's fault. It's just
it's
no
not
fault.
just a
They're in there.
dumping ground? Well, yeah.
But we've got a society where we accept that the dog is like a library book, and that, oh, we'll just give it up to rescue and they'll find another home. And people don't understand that most of the dogs will not find another home. They will end up going up in smoke if they growl, or if you haven't done everything you needed to do. It isn't a happy ending when you give them up. You're lucky if it is. But that, because people have seen it on TV shows, they go, oh, isn't it marvelous? Oh, I don't go to the hairdresser very often, but when I do, I always seem to have somebody who's washing my hair going, oh, my mother's moving into a basement flat and there's no garden, so taking the dogs to Battersea.
Oh.
And I was going, why? Why are you doing that? Why should you look for a flat that's got somewhere for dogs? Because they're old dogs. They're not going to get another home, unless they're, really, really lucky.
Yeah.
There's a high chance that, that
older dogs are very sad.
General public don't seem to know this. That
No, I think the perception is most of the dogs will get rehomed.
Yeah, and then they don't have to worry about it.
Oh dear.
So we have a lot to do. So Bark Angel's my little project where every now and again I pretend to be a pet tech startup youngster and rub shoulders with all these 20 somethings who are all.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Well, that keeps you young, and I think that's wonderful for the dog owners and dogs that are out there. So yeah, so marvelous to talk to you, and wish you all the best for the future, Bev.
Thank you for having me, and I shall look for your podcast in the future and tell everybody on my Facebook that you're there.